This is a story about a business trip that went extremely well. On the 8th of June 793, a small number of ships came ashore on a tidal island off the northeast coast of England. The monastery at Lindisfarne had no walls, no soldiers, and a very large amount of silver. The men who landed there took it, killed some of the monks, drowned others, and left. Europe reacted like the sky had cracked open. A scholar named Alcuin wrote that never before had such a terror appeared in Britain. Here's the part nobody tells you. That raid was a start-up pitch. Because before anyone could steal a single silver chalice, somebody had to pay for the ship. And the ship, the thing we put on flags and tattoos and football helmets, was the single most expensive object most Norse communities would ever build. It cost more than a farm. By some estimates, it cost more than that first raid brought home. So I want to run the numbers on Viking raiding the way you'd run numbers on any venture. What did it cost to get in? Who took the risk? Who took the profit? And what actually made money in the end? The answer is going to be annoying. Because the most profitable thing the Vikings ever did wasn't raiding. Raiding was the worst performing part of the business. The real money came later, and it came from something much more boring, much more modern, and much harder to fight. Let's start with the ship. A Viking warship was not a boat. It was a capital asset. Take the Gokstad ship, a real vessel dug out of a Norwegian burial mound in 1880. To build something like it, you need one enormous oak for the keel, and then something on the order of a dozen more large oaks split into planks. Not sawn, split, along the grain, which wastes most of the tree and produces planks that flex instead of snap. You need iron, over 1,000 rivets, each one forged individually, in a world where iron came out of bog ore and had to be smelted over charcoal by someone who did it for a living. That's the cheap part. The expensive part is the sail. A large square sail is somewhere around 90 to 100 square meters of tightly woven wool. To make that, you need fleece from a couple of hundred sheep. Then somebody has to spin it, by hand, on a drop spindle, and weave it, and waterproof it with grease. I want to be honest that the estimates here vary a lot, but the numbers researchers keep landing on are measured in years of continuous labor. Some reconstructions put a single sail at several person-years of work. Sit with what that means. The most expensive component of a Viking raid was a piece of cloth, made almost entirely by women, who did not go on the raid, and who took no share of what it brought back. Nobody puts that on a flag, so who paid for it? Usually not one man. A ship was financed the way risky ventures have always been financed, by pooling. A local chieftain, or a wealthy farmer, might own the hull outright, but the crew brought their own weapons, their own provisions, and a claim on the proceeds. The sources describe the payout as shares. The owner of the ship took a larger cut. Everyone else took a portion, adjusted for what they brought and what they did. This is a joint stock company with axes. And like any venture, the spread of outcomes was brutal. A good raid could return silver worth many times the annual output of a farm. A bad one returned nothing, minus a ship, minus the men, minus you. No insurance. No limited liability. The downside was death and the upside was a bag of metal. Which brings up the thing that makes the whole model work. The silver they took wasn't money in the way we mean it. It was weight. Norse traders carried folding balance scales. Silver moved as hack silver. Coins, yes, but also arm rings hacked apart, brooches cut in half, ingots chopped down to hit a target weight. A coin from Baghdad and a fragment of an Irish brooch were the same thing if they weighed the same. And Scandinavian hoards have produced staggering numbers of Islamic silver coins that arrived along the river routes east, which tells you something important. A great deal of that silver never came from a raid at all. It came from trade, and this is where the business model changes. By the late 10th century, English kings had worked out something uncomfortable. Fighting Viking fleets was expensive and unreliable. Paying them was predictable, so they paid. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle records tribute that starts large and becomes absurd. £10,000 of silver in 1991, and by 1012, 48,000. Look at what actually happened there. The Vikings stopped selling a one-time product, a raid, and started selling a subscription. Recurring revenue, collected annually from a customer who could not cancel. No sailing into arrow fire. No losing the ship. Just a deadline and a number that went up at every renewal. Protection money is the highest margin product in history, and they found it 1,000 years before anybody wrote it down as a business model. There's a darker line item I'm not going to skip, because leaving it out turns this into a costume drama. A significant share of Viking-era profit came from selling people. Captives taken on raids were sold into slave markets that ran from Dublin to the Middle East. It's in the written sources and it's in the archaeology, and it was almost certainly steadier money than the silver. So here's what I keep coming back to. We remember the Vikings for the part of the business that worked worst. The raid is the story, the ship, the axe, the burning monastery. But the raid was the high-risk, low-reliability product. The money was in shipping, in extortion, and in human beings. And there's one more detail that gets me. All across Scandinavia, we keep digging up buried silver hoards, thousands of them. Every one of those hoards is a person who buried their savings for safekeeping and never came back to collect. We aren't finding their treasure, we're finding their retirement plans. And every single one of them failed. The ones who did well weren't the ones with the biggest axe. They were the ones who worked out how to get paid without swinging it. If you want more stories where the money turns out to be hiding somewhere other than where the story says it is, subscribe. It genuinely helps a small channel like this one. And there's a new one every week. I'm Snaky. Stay suspicious.